This podcast is brought to you by Flipper, a marketplace to buy and sell websites, stores, and digital real estate. Plot your own path. Become a boss by buying a small online business at Flipper. Simply visit flipper.com/techtalks for a free consultation and 50% off fees. That's FLIPPA, flipper.com/techtalks. If you do visit, let me know how you get on. But now, let's get the show started.
Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And man, do I have a treat for any startup founder listening today. Because today's guest is going to be Bryan Clayton, and he's the CEO and co-founder of a company called GreenPal, which is an online marketplace that connects homeowners with local lawn care professionals. But I'm not doing it justice by saying that, because it's been called the Uber for lawn care by Entrepreneur magazine and has over 100,000 active users, completing thousands of transactions every single day. But it's the story behind it that really interests me, because before starting GreenPal, Bryan founded Peachtree, one of the largest landscaping companies in the state of Tennessee, and grew it to over $10 million a year in annual revenue before it was acquired in 2013. But of course, here in 2020, if you live in the US, you can open an app on your phone and have someone come and cut your grass. But I want to learn more about the story that began when he was pushing a lawnmower many, many years ago, and how from that moment he went on to scale to the whole of the US and maybe even the UK in the future too. And Bryan also has vast experience in expertise in entrepreneurialism, small business growth, marketing, bootstrapping businesses from zero revenue to profitability and exit. But apart from all that, it's his passion for what he does that really shines through. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Nashville, Tennessee, where Bryan Clayton, CEO and co-founder of GreenPal, is waiting to speak with us now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Bryan Clayton. I am CEO and co-founder of GreenPal. GreenPal, in one sentence, is Uber for lawn mowing. So if you're a homeowner or you rent a home and you need grass cutting services, you can use the GreenPal website or app to find the best local lawn mowing service you can in 60 seconds and hire them in a push of a button. So I've been in the lawn mowing business my entire life. I actually started a lawn cutting service when I was in high school as a way to earn extra money, and then did it all through college. And over about a 15-year period of time, built my first business into 150 employees and sold that landscaping company to the largest landscaping business in the United States. And then I rebooted and started GreenPal.
Love this story. And I believe your journey in tech began when you founded, was it Peachtree Inc., which was one of the largest landscaping companies in the entire state of Tennessee, and grew it into a $10 million a year in annual revenue before it was acquired by, was it Lusa Holdings back in 2013? But can I ask that you share the story and how you got where you are today? Because it really is inspiring, especially for other tech startup founders out there listening.
Yeah. So you're correct. My first business, I grew from zero, just me and a push mower, to over 150 people, $10 million a year in annual revenue in 2013. And that business was acquired by a company that bought and rolled up landscaping businesses like mine. And building that business from scratch in the late 90s and all through the 2000s and through the dot-com bust in 2001, then the economic crisis in 2008. There was a lot of ups and downs building that company that prepared me for now building my second business, which is a technology-driven business. And so I was able to learn kind of the domain experience of the landscaping business, building and growing Peachtree. And I was able to apply that to GreenPal to make the whole lawn mowing business, whole lawn mowing industry run smoother and more efficiently for landscape service providers and homeowners looking to hire them. And so there was a lot of parallels between the two different businesses. But one thing that was challenging was reinventing myself as a business owner after selling my first business and starting a technology-driven business. That's one thing I didn't realize was going to be so challenging was there's a big difference between running a blue-collar style, traditional style business and running a tech startup. And so it literally took me 2 or 3 years to learn how to build software, how to design software, how to run a team a team of engineers that creates software. And if I had known how hard it was going to be, I probably would have never gotten started. but looking back, 7 years later, after starting GreenPal, we're nationwide in the United States. We have over 200,000 active users that use the platform to get grass cutting done. And this year we're going to pass $20 million in gross revenue. So looking back, it worked out. But if I had known how hard it was going to be, I probably would have never done it.
And listening to your story there, it reminds me of that Steve Jobs quote where you can't join up the dots looking forward. It's not until you're further on when you look back that you can see how everything fell into place, can't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. You kind of just have to almost just get started, get in the trenches and just start working and just figure it out as you go. It's just that simple thing just really applies to almost anything you're doing. You can just map it out as much as you want on a business plan, but until you get in there, you just really don't know what you're dealing with.
And like you said, here in 2020, GreenPal is described as the Uber of lawn care. But can you tell me a little bit more about what it is exactly and the story behind the company and just a little bit more about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing my first business, I started out as just mowing lawns in my neighborhood. And so after my first year in business in 1998, I ended up with like 20 lawn mowing customers. And then I grew that business little by little over time, acquiring more residential clientele until that business grew to a point after I had about 20 employees that we no longer were able to service the residential market because it just wasn't profitable for us anymore. And one of the things I always observed running that first company was that even though my landscaping company was one of the biggest in town, I would still get 20 or 30 phone calls a day from homeowners just looking for a reliable lawn cutting service. That it actually was harder than you would think to find a decent lawn mowing service to come on a consistent basis. And I just saw this for years and years and years. And in effect, what we became was a referral service in our community to refer out these inquiries to little lawn mowing businesses in our neighborhoods. And I trained my secretary to keep a list of 20 or 30 smaller lawn care services, and we would just refer them. Well, when I sold that business, I saw what was happening in ride sharing with Uber and Lyft and what Airbnb was doing for accommodations. And I just knew that this problem existed and that technology could solve the problem for both sides of the transaction. It could help promote these small business owners that were just getting started in the landscaping maintenance business and could give them a place to accumulate reviews and to build their little brand. And while enabling homeowners to hire them at a touch of a button. Giving them that Uber-like experience. And so I knew that problem existed. I knew that technology could make it so much more efficient on both sides of the transaction. And so I decided, okay, well, let's do the second act of my entrepreneurial journey. And so I recruited 2 co-founders and we just started working on it. We didn't know the first thing about building software. None of us knew how to write any code. None of us knew how to design software. But we just started just doing whatever we could do. And the first thing we did was we hired a development shop in Nashville to build the first version. And we really literally thought that we were just going to pay a shop to build it, and then we would market it, and then we would just be off to the races. Nothing was further from the truth with how it worked out. We spent $120,000 building the first version, and it was a total piece of junk. It was clunky. It was hard to use. It was nobody on either side of the transaction really could understand how to use it. It really didn't work well on mobile devices. It was a total, utter failure. But we were able to get a handful of users to use it. What we did was we passed out something like 100,000 flyers around Nashville, Tennessee ourselves. Hanging door hangers, advertising this new thing to help you get a lawn mowing service in 60 seconds. And we were able to get 20 or 30 people to use it and to give us the feedback on what problem that we were solving for them, where did we delight them, if ever, and where do we let them down. And we were able to validate the idea of, okay, yeah, this is actually something that consumers will use. And it was enough so that we were able to regain confidence to keep moving forward. So we had to reboot the whole team and rebuild the whole team from the inside out in terms of teaching ourselves the skills that we needed to execute the tactics to build this platform. And so one of my co-founders went to a software boot camp for 6 months, and he learned how to do back-end software engineering. I learned how to do marketing and growth hacking and distribution of software. And then my other co-founder learned how to do front-end product design and front-end engineering. That in and of itself took a year or two, but we just kept on working on the next version and getting the second version of it out the door. And then after that, we were able to kind of like chart our own course. We were able to continuously get the feedback we needed from users and bake that into the experience and just make it better and better and better.
And obviously you started there. Well, we're talking to you today in Nashville. How far do you stretch now? How many miles do you go, and how many markets do you serve at the moment?
Yeah. So there's a saying in these types of businesses: to nail it, then scale it. And so that was the playbook we ran. We knew that if we could make it work in a city like Nashville, that we could then multiply it to any market in the United States. And so that's what we did. So for the first 2 years, almost 3 years, we were only live in Nashville. And so we were just trying to perfect the playbook, trying to perfect the reliability of the platform. Whereas if you were a homeowner, you could just jump onto it and get 5 quotes back in a minute or less, and then read reviews. You can see stats about your local lawn mowing services and hire the one you want to work with. And then when you hire them, that they actually show up and do a good job. It took us 3 years to figure out how to build the software and make the platform deliver that experience consistently. But once we figured that out and we got that reliable, we were then ready to expand into other markets. And so our second market was Tampa, Florida. And I know the inside of every coffee shop in Tampa Bay. I went down there and I interviewed hundreds of lawn mowing services myself personally to get the best ones, because I knew our second market, if we flopped and didn't and failed on launching our second market, that the whole thing was going to be a bust. And so we just old school hand-to-hand combat style launched that second market because it was that critical for us. And then to our delight, after a year, we were able to get Tampa, Florida going. And by way of launching Nashville, then Tampa, we were able to develop a repeatable playbook of, okay, this is how we go into a city, and this is how we build it from the ground up. And this is how we recruit the suppliers. This is how we market it to homeowners. And this is how we spark the critical mass of interactions that have to happen between these two sides of the transaction to get that flywheel going. And then our fourth year, we launched into 6 cities, and then the next year we launched into 20, and then 40, and we've just been doubling ever since. Now here we are, 7 years in. We are nationwide. We're in every state. We're in every major market, and now we are focused on what they call like your non-NFL cities. So any big cities that don't have a pro football team or a pro sports team. So your cities that are like 100,000, 200,000 population. You're like Kalamazoo, Michigan, or something like that. That's what we're growing into now. And then after we saturate all that, we're going to go into Canada and then maybe UK or Australia.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And I'm curious, for any other startup founders that want to repeat in a different industry, what have been your biggest challenges in scaling to that level?
Oh man, where do I even start? Well, for us, one challenging thing is that we're bootstrapped, we're self-funded. And the reason for that is my first business I built debt-free, and I built it with no outside investors. And that was, in my experience, one of the primary reasons why I was able to get that company sold. Yeah. Was because when we went to sell the business, we had no debt on our balance sheet, and therefore it was just a very clean transaction. Whereas a lot of my competitors in that business had a ton of debt, and they might have had a $10 million business, but they also had $9 million in debt. So they didn't really have anything. So just kind of that that sustainable approach is baked into my DNA as an entrepreneur. And so that's why we've been resistant to raising outside capital or taking on debt to start this business, is because I knew if we could build a profitable business, we could always reinvest the profits back into the business on a monthly basis. And that's the approach we've taken. However, it's very difficult to get that cash generating machine started. And so the first 4 years of starting this company were excruciating, because we could pay ourselves nothing or a very minimal salary. My two co-founders and I had to survive on just rice and beans for a very long time while working, 70, 80-hour weeks, driving the business forward. And so that in and of itself was extremely challenging. But now that, we've grown it to good revenues, we're able to build out a team and we're able to market it. It's a lot more fun now, but those early years were very, very challenging. In terms of starting a business like this, it's a delicate orchestration between recruiting the suppliers to the platform and marketing it to homeowners, because you're trying to satisfy the needs of both sides of the transaction. And a lot of times those desires don't always line up. And so we've had to kind of strike a delicate balance between the two, to where lawn mowing services want to use the platform to grow their business while providing a nice, beautiful Uber-like experience to homeowners. So synthesizing that over many years of trial and error has been a challenge. And aside from that, building something that doesn't yet exist has been a lot more challenging than I ever thought it was going to be. When I was running a landscaping construction business, there were other big companies in other cities that I could emulate. In fact, that's what I did. I would go to these conferences, and I would go to Chicago, Illinois, or I would go to LA or Dallas, bigger cities, and I would look at the largest landscaping company in that town, and I would try to meet with that owner, and I could look at their systems, and I could borrow processes from them, and I could emulate things that they were doing. In fact, that's a lot of the reason why my business was successful was because I was learning from business owners that were bigger than me. When you're building a tech startup like this, where you're literally inventing a new product, it's you're in uncharted territory. There is no roadmap. And so the only way to find your way to success is just through trial and error, trying things and failing, and doing that over and over again and trying to learn until you figure out what works. And so that has been one of the most challenging pieces of getting it from zero revenue now to $20 million in revenue, was just the trial and error nature of getting there.
So much gold in there, especially for startup founders listening, and for people listening that need somebody to mow their lawn, whether they're a homeowner or a landlord. Can you just walk me through how to get the most out of the platform as soon as you download it?
Absolutely. So you mentioned landlords. We have a lot of property managers, real estate investors, realtors that use the platform to manage anywhere from 2 to 100 properties. And so that's a big use case for us. Whether you're a landlord or you just rent a home and you just want somebody to mow your grass every 2 weeks, rather than having to call down the list on Craigslist or posting something on Facebook or asking somebody for a referral, you just go to the GreenPal app, or just go to yourgreenpal.com, and you just put your address in, and that's it. Add email address, home address, and then you'll get 5 quotes back in less than a minute. After you get those quotes, you can read reviews about what other people in your community have to say about their experience with that lawn service. You can also look at how statistics that we acquire on them, as far as how often they show up on time. How often do other clients book them for a second mowing? Things like that can kind of indicate to you their reliability and the quality of service that they deliver to their clientele. After you decide who you want to work with, you just pick the one you want, and then you put your credit card in to reserve them. They come out and mow, and then after you're satisfied with the service, that's when you pay. If that went well, you can then book them for the rest of the season. If you didn't like them for whatever reason, you can try somebody else.
And I believe you currently have 100,000 active users completing thousands of transactions every single day. And I'm curious, do you allow yourself to just look back at how much you've achieved and give yourself that pat on the back, or you just keep marching forward regardless?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a couple couple quotes that I like. One is the famous quote from Jeff Bezos, is that it's always day one.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to look back, but it's like we are so far from where we want to be. And so we have so much further to go. And so not really is the answer to that question. We really don't ever get to look back and take a deep breath, say we made it, because we haven't yet. We have so much deeper to go in this industry and in the United States even, and internationally. So we really haven't had a chance to do that yet. The second piece of that is I have one of my favorite quotes is by Mark Cuban, and he says, you have to be working so hard because somebody else is in a garage working harder to take it all away from you. And so you have to have that like almost slight degree of paranoia when you're in business, especially in a tech-driven business, because it changes so fast. You have to be constantly improving the product, polishing the product, listening to users, understanding where you're letting them down, looking for ways that you can make it faster, quicker, cheaper, because there's a team of people that possibly are smarter than you, that could even be more capitalized than your team, that is working hard to take it all away from you. And so those two things constantly are in my mind to keep us driving forward, to keep us growing, keep us doubling every year. And I think it's a healthy dose of paranoia is the thrust behind any successful tech business. Yeah, if you have a small business in a community and you've got good market share, like my last business, when we got it to 8-9 million, I was able to like step back and pay a good ops manager, and I didn't have to work that hard, to be honest. This business is very different.
I've had countless emails from listeners over the last few weeks talking about their fears and concerns around job security, while also seeing their interest rates on their savings drop considerably. And as a result, many are beginning to look at how they can invest in their future in an uncertain time. Could digital assets be the answer? Now, you might remember that I spoke to Blake Hutchinson, CEO at Flipper, on episode 1194 about how to buy digital assets and websites. In a nutshell, Flipper is a marketplace that you can buy and sell websites, stores, and digital real estate that are just ready to go. So if you do have dreams of running your own successful online business, or perhaps you're looking to exit your existing online business, my friends at Flipper can help you buy and sell. So if you're interested and want to find out more, please visit flipper.com/techtalks. That's FLIPPA.com/techtalks for a free consultation and also 50% off all fees. But now, back to the interview. As someone that's been on a phenomenal journey and got a lot of advice and insights and expertise that you've picked up along that journey, for any startup founders listening, what would you say are the biggest pros and cons of raising outside capital?
Yeah, so I don't think there's one path to success.
Yeah.
My path is bootstrapping the business, self-funding it, slow and low, and just being what they call a cockroach, meaning you can't be killed, is my path to success in both businesses that I have started. That said, if you look on the first page on your phone and you look at all the apps on there, I'm willing to bet 100% of them were fueled by venture capital.
Yeah.
So I'm not one of these business owners or entrepreneurs that poo-poos venture capital because, for whatever reasons. I still believe, like, if you're trying to really swing for the fences and you want to build $1 billion business, that you're going to have to raise venture capital, and you're going to have to do it wisely. That said, on the other hand, I think venture capital has destroyed more businesses than it has built. So you have to be willing to accept that binary outcome of you're going to get rich or die trying. And it's literally like a 1 in 100 or maybe a 1 in 50 shot that you're going to make it. And what we don't understand as small business owners, entrepreneurs, tech startup entrepreneurs, whenever you look in the tech press and so-and-so company has raised $100 million or so-and-so company is sold for $1 billion, one thing we don't really know and understand is that a lot of times that CEO, that founder, or that team is on its second or third try, meaning they have already like crashed and burned 2 or 3 other businesses before they had that hit. And so a lot of times they step up to the plate on that one that they knocked out of the park, and they've already struck out at like horribly 2 or 3 times before that. And they've applied those learnings to the one that worked. And so you have to keep that in the back of your mind that it's not as easy as they make it look, and that the seduction of outside venture capital, I mean, you really need to think through that. You need to be willing to sign up for that 0 or 100 outcome. And it is a truly binary outcome in most cases. And that's the ride you need to be willing to accept if you're willing to go down that path.
And something else that stands out about your journey, just listening to it here, is you've navigated a traditional business to a technology-based business. How difficult was that transition?
It was really tough.
Yeah.
And it was one that I didn't anticipate would be so hard. One thing when you're getting started, like if you ran a traditional blue-collar business and then you want to become a tech startup entrepreneur, your days are going to be balance between on it and in it, meaning you're going to be writing code, you're going to be writing blog posts, learning how to do SEO, learning how to design software. You're going to be doing all of these tasks. But then another big part of your day, in fact, probably half of your day, is just learning, poring over blog posts, poring over YouTube videos, Udemy videos, masterclass videos, whatever you can get your hands on to learn the skills that you're going to have to master to even play in this game. And so for me, the first 3 years was me executing and my team executing the tactical things that needed to happen. And then literally half of the day just watching tutorials, watching interviews, listening to podcasts from about people way smarter than me that were doing the things that I was trying to do, and then learning those skills, learning those tactics, and then applying them to what I was doing. So there's a lot of learning that goes on when you're trying to reinvent yourself to become a tech entrepreneur. One thing we don't understand is that, like the Airbnb guys, those guys spent 3 years trying to get that business going. But on like day one of the co-founders, their CTO, was one of the preeminent spammers in the world. This is not talked about very often, but he understood how to literally spam people over email to grow a product and generate revenue. And that was one of the early things that they did at Airbnb to acquire supply side. And so those guys started day one with those sets of skills. They had been hacking all through high school and all through college. If that's not your upbringing, and you're going to start from zero and you don't have any tech background, there's going to be a 2 or 3 year lag where you're going to have to learn these skills just by reading, applying them, trying stuff, and repeating that process over and over again.
Sound advice again. And something else on this podcast that I always try and do is explore stories that will help other startup founders. And when I was doing a bit of research before you came on the podcast today, I ended up reading a great post on Forbes where you spoke about navigating the world of divorce, of all things. And I think that's something that many founders won't think of. So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about that article and the lessons that you learned? Because I think it's something that most people just never dream of when they're getting involved in a startup.
Oh yeah, great question. So many different, paradigms that you have to look at, and you have to make sure that you've thought about when you're starting one of these businesses. One, the obvious ones is: are you solving a problem that needs to be solved in the world? Do you have a way to acquire users? Can you pull this off from a tactical level? But then there's all these other things that you don't even think about, like the legal structure. Do you have the right legal structure? If you want to raise outside capital, do you have the right legal team that is setting your business up in such a way to where you're protected as the owner from outside legal threats? Because there always will be. And then also just your internal dynamics of your team, your co-founders. What does the equity look like? How is it split up? Is it split up fairly? What are the expectations of everybody? And then there's one that you never even think about is what happens when one of your co-founders is going to go through a divorce. What happens then? And that happened to us, and we didn't see it coming. But one of our co-founders, 3 years in, sadly was going through a divorce. And what happened, and what we didn't anticipate was going to happen, was that his equity, and he had a sizable chunk of equity in the business, was going to be split in half between him and his spouse. And what they call that is, when that happens, it's called dead equity, meaning you now have a chunk of the business who is owned by somebody who is not in the trenches with you, who doesn't have a vested interest in the business success. Because in the early days of a business, equity holders are also, helping you do the things that need to be done to push the business forward. And so now we had a huge chunk on our cap table of an owner of equity who wasn't an investor, was not an advisor, was not somebody who was willing to come in on Saturdays and Sunday afternoons to do the things that needed to be done. And so we had to address that because, even then it was 3 years, 2.5, 3 years in, we were still in infancy in the business. We were still trying to get the thing going. And so at that point, it was very critical for us to address this problem. We had to think creatively, and we had to take on a line of credit to buy out that piece of equity. And it almost sunk the business. Luckily, all the parties involved were amiable, and we all came together and we worked it out. But had it been super contentious, it might have been a situation where the business would not be here today, and I wouldn't be on this podcast with you. So that said, think through these things and map them out legally first. If we had one document that would outline what would happen in the event of divorce, we could have circumvented all that, but we didn't have it, and so we had to really scramble and try to solve the problem on the fly. And luckily, it worked out.
I can hear alarm bells going off all over the world right now on that revelation.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious, as someone who has bootstrapped a business from zero revenue to profitability and exit, what advice would you leave startup founders with today? It's a big question, isn't it? It's really just focusing on what matters. And that's a cliche thing to say, right? But when you're bootstrapping a business, that relentless focus on the one or two things you can be working on to drive the business forward is so critical. Because for any business owner, whether it's small business, tech, big business, we're inundated with all of these sexy new things that you want to try to grow your business, and really you have to just focus on one or two things. When you're bootstrapping a business, it's to use the NFL as an analogy. You're not making long Hail Mary passes down the field. It's all running game. You're just going 2 or 3 yards at a time and just driving down the field incrementally until you get to the end zone. And you're not making any really swift, sexy moves. And it's not a whole lot of fun, to be honest, in the early years. But to me, just that relentless focus on, okay, what are the one or two things, the objectives we're working on this week, this month, and how are we tying that back to what it is we're trying to do in terms of growth? Repeating that cycle over and over and over again is one of those things that sounds simple, but it's hard to do. And that's my advice to any small business owner who's just getting started is just start small and just focus on what's in your circle of influence. What are the things that you can work on, and really not even worry about anything else. And you strike me as the kind of guy that's not going to stand still in one place. So I've got to ask, what's next for GreenPal and indeed yourself? I appreciate you probably can't share too much about the road ahead, but is there anything you can leave us with today?
Great question. And I appreciate that question because my businesses are always my vehicle for my personal development. So my business is always requiring things of me that I'm not necessarily comfortable doing. And whether it have been like when I was 21 years old, hiring my first employee, or 25 years old, leading 20 or 30 people, all of which who were older than me. And now here I am, I'm trying to figure out, okay, we just did 20, we're going to do $20 million this year. How do we do 40 next year? Like all of these things that are challenges for me. My business is the thrust that causes me to level up year after year after year. So no matter how successful I become, I think I always will be in the game because I love winning. I love growing. I love progress. And so I will always be in a business that's growing, hopefully super fast, because I love it. It's a lot of fun for me. For us with GreenPal, we have so much further to go. And we haven't even scratched the surface on how deep we want to go into this industry. Until you think of GreenPal as cutting your grass, like you would say, I'm going to go Uber there, we're not done. We want to be in the lexicon of the English language as, oh yeah, there's no reason to cut your grass. Just get a GreenPal. Until we've done that, we're not going to be done.
Awesome. And for anyone listening that would like to find out more information about GreenPal or contact a member of your team, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, you can just email me, Bryan, Bryan, @yourgreenpal.com. You can download GreenPal in the App Store or Google Play Store.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today. So much inspiration, especially when I think back to you pushing that mower to going on and working 70-hour weeks, eating nothing but rice and beans, to where you are now and where you're heading in the future. And hopefully one day here in the UK, I'll be able to test that app out myself. But more than anything, just a big thank you for sharing that story with me today.
Right on, Neil. I appreciate it, man. I enjoyed it.
Wow, what a story. There's so much gold in that interview. And one of the reasons I record this podcast every single day is to try and inspire people listening to make their move. So if you're sat there thinking, well, what's the point? I'm not going to make it. I want you to replay Bryan's interview and hear his story again, from being just that guy pushing a mower to working 70 hours a week and covering most of the US. And that is why it's one of the interviews that will stay with me for a long, long time. And it's not very often I say that, because I have recorded 1,300 of them now. But I want to hear more stories like this, and I want to hear your stories too. And even if you don't have one of those and you've just enjoyed a particular one that has inspired you, please don't be a lurker. I'm an easygoing guy, and I give you my contact details at the end of every episode for a good reason. So why not send me a message now saying, Neil, I'm a long-time listener but first-time caller in the subject line, and let me know if anything has inspired you, because I kind of hope that when I send these podcasts out into the universe, that somebody somewhere is going to take just one little piece of advice and transform their life. That's why I do this every single day. So before I get all emotional and sentimental, I'm going to make an excuse and get out of here now. So a big thank you for listening. So remember, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. You'll find all my social channels at the bottom. But a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.